As we continue with our series on those who stand at the cross, two scriptures to paint the backdrop for scene number 11 and Mary Magdalene. First, Mark chapter 14, verse 3. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of spikenard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. And then this at Calvary from Matthew 27, verses 55 and 56. And many women who followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, were there looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joses, and the mother of Zebedee. In the motley audience of Golgotha, Mary alone had reason for joy. It wasn't much, but it was real. Joy. The priests and the rabble standing there laughed and joked, but their levity wasn't joy. The soldiers found diversion in their conversations. Now, this was just a job to them. But callous indifference is hardly joy. John was there, and some of the other disciples as well, disappointed with themselves in their failures of the night before, dazed now by this tragedy. Mary hurt as John did, maybe worse. Jesus had been everything to her. When he found her, she was in hell, literally possessed by demons, frequently abused by men. Jesus changed all that. He had set her free from the demons, 7 times invading devil's territory to rescue her. Now he was dying. Who would protect her from demons and scheming men? Who would rescue her if she was entrapped? Who would save her from her own self-destructive urges? Whom would she live for? Whom would she love? But unlike anyone else on Golgotha, in the midst of her bewildered grief, Mary had one little reason for joy. She remembered the feast at Simon's house. It was a dinner to honor Jesus. Simon owed it. Jesus had healed him of leprosy. Simon had tasted only the beginnings of the horrors of leprosy. He hadn't yet endured the creeping disfigurement, the loss of toes or fingers, nose and eyes. But he'd been quarantined, separated for life from his friends at the synagogue, prohibited by law from ever again participating in their worship or their debates over the Torah. He'd been completely cut off from any physical contact with his wife and children. When you had leprosy, it was as though death already ate at your body even while you lived. It was the curse of God. It was here and now damnation. So the dinner was formal. Black suit, black tie, black cummerbund, all the rest. Martha did her usual unexcelled job of catering. Elegance and protocol were flawless. Jesus and his inner circle ringed the table along with friends of Simon. Lazarus. Good, faithful Lazarus was there. He'd become something of a celebrity since his resurrection. Mary knew what she was going to do was totally inappropriate. People like her did not converse with or touch people like Jesus. But she had spent so much of her life being inappropriate, well, she was used to it. She had saved and planned for buying this perfume. She knew some of her friends would tease her about wasting a year's wages on a holy man? She was only sorry she had no more to spend. Jesus was worth everything she had and more. Why did she pick this party? Why this afternoon? She didn't know. Something inside said, Mary, now. So she had slipped in surreptitiously, broken the seal, and slipped over and poured the extravagant and costly alabaster perfume on Jesus' head. And then, overcome with emotion, she fell at his feet, crying silently. She kissed his feet and wiped the tears from them with her waist-length hair that she had let down. She could still feel the terror of the nights when the demons would assert their control. Too awful to recall voluntarily was the memory of mornings after the nights before, of promiscuous sex. Hard men and unfriendly supernatural beings had controlled her life, used her, abused her, ruined her. And then this man saved her, exorcised the demons, even when she appeared not to want deliverance. Then when he had made her his own by snatching her away from the demons and the Johns, instead of claiming his share of her favors, he gave her back her purity and set her free. No wonder she cried. Now, alabaster perfume is hard to hide. Spikenard, and as the expensive fragrance usually reserved for royalty and kings drifted across the room, Judas spoke up. He was quick to detect that fragrance. He had noticed Mary crying over Jesus' feet over there. He knew her story. It was a rather sorry one. Mary was now one of the women who followed Jesus down from Galilee. She was the kind of a person, Judas thought, who gave their organization a bad name. I mean, talk about riffraff. Her kind thought the sun rose and set in Jesus. They had no understanding of the kind of political handling and maneuvering required to promote someone like Jesus. They had no appreciation for the skills of someone like Judas. So his annoyance finally erupted. You read the record there. This is awful. It's downright sickening. Why hasn't this perfume sold and the money used to feed poor folk? You all know how important careful management of our resources is. A lot of people depend on us. To himself he fumed, how can anyone justify spending that much money on perfume for Jesus? And this kissing and crying, it is disgusting. Does Jesus have no sense of propriety? Well, Mary was shattered by Judas's words. She could hear the murmur of agreement around the table. She felt the old terror welling up inside. Men, important men, disapproved of her. She had only meant to tell Jesus how much he had done for her. Had she made a mistake? Had she embarrassed him? Had she wasted money Jesus would have preferred used some other way? Was it selfish to spend so much on a gift just for him? She glanced furtively at Simon. She could feel the disgust on his face. He agreed with Judas. She had no right to touch the teacher. She wished that the floor would just open up and swallow her up and that the roof would just cave in. She cowered, clinging to the feet of the only man who had ever been able to restore and rescue her. Again, Jesus breaks the power of those who would control her. Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a good work for me. You always have the poor with you, and whenever you wish, you may do them good. You will not always have me with you. She has done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body for the burial. Now here at Mount Calvary, Mary Magdalene stands on that Black Friday. There was Golgotha, mixed in with the stupefying hurt caused by Jesus' death. Mixed in was the sweet memory of the perfume and his words, "She has done a good work for me." The rich melody of those words played over and over in her mind. She has done a good work for me. She had done it in time. She had done right. He said so. He knew she owed him everything, her life, her dignity, her womanhood. She had told him before he died. And now, even through her tears, she gave thanks she hadn't waited. She hoped that there on the cross, he remembered the perfume. She hoped he remembered her tears and kisses and would know there was at least one person in the world who knew how valuable his life had been. No matter what happened that afternoon on the hill, he would know he had saved one person. And to think she had almost not done it. She remembered Simon's muttered complaint to Judas, and if Jesus knew what kind of woman that is, he would not allow her to touch him. That much I know for sure. Mary laughed to think about it now. It offered a bit of comic relief. If Jesus had known what kind of woman were touching him, why, Jesus knew more about her than Simon ever did. Besides, Simon wasn't all that pure himself, the hypocrite. She could tell a story or two. Why did Simon think she was touching him anyway? Did he, in his wildest dreams, think that she put Jesus in the same category as Simon? No way. Jesus was not another lover, not another customer, as Simon had been. Jesus was her Savior. He had rescued her. He'd remade her. She wasn't the kind of woman Simon thought she was. She had been, true enough. But this man's touch had changed all that. Perhaps the most amazing turn of the afternoon had been Jesus' reaction to Simon's mutterings. "Simon," he said, "I have a question." You could see Simon's face go white. He must have thought Jesus was going to expose him. Simon, a rich man, had two aides. One owed him $100,000. The other servant owed him $300. The rich man took pity on both of them and forgave their debts. Which one do you think loved the rich man more? Simon exhaled slowly through pursed lips. I suppose the one who was forgiven more? You are right, Jesus responded. You see this woman? Simon, when I came here, you didn't give me water to wash my feet, but she washed them with her tears and dried them with her hair. Simon, you didn't offer me any cologne. She has perfumed my head and my feet. Her sins were obvious and many. That's true. That's why she loves me, Simon. more than you can ever know. But the warmth and determination of her love just as obviously declare that she has received full pardon for her sins. Then turning to Mary, he said gently but loud enough that no one in the room missed his words, "Mary, your sins are forgiven. You may go now in peace." She left as in a dream, a queen dismissed to her palace. Then this morning, Mary Magdalene heard that Jesus had been arrested. She knew it couldn't be true, but it was. And then they had brought him out here and nailed him to that cross. She had never heard this much in her life. But at least she had told him in time. Standing there, she could make no sense of the day's happenings. The noblest, strongest man who had ever lived was being executed as a usurper and traitor. To people who did not know him, he appeared no different from the vermin on either side of him. When she heard his sorrowful cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" she echoed him, "Yes, God, why have you forsaken him? How could you do this? How could you forsake us?" And all Mary saw that afternoon was the triumph of evil. But in the future, when in memory she again stood and watched the teacher suffer, she would understand it better than almost anyone else. She understood extravagant love. In her extravagant response to what Jesus had done for her, the alabaster box, she had developed an intuitive understanding of God's love. Her own experience of giving everything was a finger play of the Trinity's decision to spend the entire resources of heaven to ransom sinful humans from their self-inflicted slavery. There are 3 sermons in Mary's story. Do it richly, do it now. Too often we bemoan our imagined poverty, saying, if I only had $1 million, I'd build a new science building at our church's college. I would buy motorcycles for the pastors in Africa who serve 20 or 30 churches, traveling between them on foot because they cannot afford even a bicycle or bus tickets. Or I would see to it that quality Christian programming was on the air in every city in the country. If only I could preach like Billy Graham or HMS Richards. If only I could teach with the skills of Brother Jackson, then I could really do something for God. So, what do? Nothing. Surrounded every day by opportunities to encourage with a letter or a phone call, well, we do nothing. In practically every church, there are single folks and lonely couples we could invite to lunch. Everywhere, at work, next door, at school, at church, there are people we could love, we could help. Instead, we daydream of doing something great someday. Now, friend, Mary could not preach like Peter. She could not heal or command the lame to stand and walk. She couldn't travel as a missionary to Turkey and Greece like Paul. But she did what she could. That's what Jesus said was so beautiful. She didn't wait to be asked. She did not require recognition or official sanction. She simply found a way to love. Mary did what she could with what she had. We need to quit dreaming and do it. Mary loved richly. She was reckless and extravagant in love. Have you ever been extravagant with your love? Gone out and just bought her flowers? Oh, we can't afford it. Who said so? You know, many husbands need to learn from her. We need to consider the needs of our wives for nice things. Now, frugality is a virtue, but sometimes it is merely a front for stinginess. You know, for some husbands, opening the checkbook would be an appropriate and powerful expression of affection. Love, by its very nature, is extravagant. Oh, yes, by pecuniary, calculating, objective measures, it's a waste of money to buy bouquets of flowers that just die anyway. Perfume, to give spikenard. What a waste. But you see, by his acceptance of Mary's fragrant gift of extravagant love, Jesus showed there are times when it is most appropriate. Husbands and wives need to spend time and money on each other. No, not maxing out the credit card, but within reasonable limits. Maybe it could mean some long stem roses for your wife, accompanied by your hug. Maybe candlelight dinners on a date night every week. Possibly, wives, you could surprise your husband with a special dish when you know he's not expecting it. Go the extra mile. Give of yourself. Jesus dignified generous expressions of love by his affirmation of Mary's extravagant gift of spikenard. Now, this same principle applies to all our relationships: friends, co-workers, parents and children, pastors, teachers, parishioners, employers, and employees. All need the sweet fragrance of expressed appreciation. Now, Mary no doubt never again had the kind of money she spent on that perfume, but she never regretted her love gift to Jesus. Never. We too will treasure the memories of the extravagances that express our love. Let's love richly. Do it now. Mary's 1 pound of alabaster spikenard perfume brought far more joy to Jesus than the lavish funeral arrangements Nicodemus provided. He spent money on 100 pounds of spikenard, $1 million worth. But it was too late then. Jesus couldn't smell the fragrance in the tomb. Listen, some people wait until the funeral to buy roses for their loved one. They cover the casket and the entire funeral parlor, and that loved one can't see or smell the roses. 1 rose now is more than 100 roses on a casket. In my years as a pastor, I've preached more than 200 funeral sermons. Let me tell you, some of the saddest times in my pastoral ministry were listening to sobs of people bitterly going up to the casket and wailing, "I love you, I love you, I love you. I never told you or bought you flowers," regretting their failure to say, "I love you," or "thank you" in time. They'd always meant to do it. They just never got around to it. And suddenly, it was too late. Eulogies and flowers are not heard or seen by the person eulogized in that casket. Jesus commended Mary because she came to anoint his body before the funeral. Mary gave her perfume and kisses in time. Let's do the same. Jesus had been the focus of attention for thousands. 5,000 plus people had hung on his every word and then eaten a supper he miraculously created. On another occasion, 4,000 plus did the same. He had nearly been pushed into the lake by a crowd of eager listeners. Once while he was preaching in a house, Jesus had been interrupted by 4 men making a hole up in the roof. They were attempting to get their friend to Jesus so he could heal him. The crowd around the house had been that thick. On the cross now, Jesus was alone. Some of his friends, just a few, stood at a distance, displaced from their rightful place near the cross by the hostile rabble. John, Jesus' mother, and Mary Magdalene had pushed through the mob to the very foot of the cross. But when Jesus and John's mother left, Mary stayed. She was still there when he cried out because he felt God had abandoned him. Perhaps he could still smell the fragrance. Spirit of prophecy says that fragrance, her perfume, was the only vivid reminder of someone who loved so extravagantly. Vivid in his memory, her presence, her perfume, his only apparent support. Jesus had told Simon that the greatest debtor, once forgiven, becomes the greatest lover. Mary would claim her place as one of those. She had anointed him ahead of time for his burial. She would stay to the end. Of all the friends of Jesus, Mary is the only one mentioned by name that we know for sure was there when he died. Now that is a hard privilege, but what a privilege nonetheless. So she was there when they took him down from the cross. She was there and followed him to the grave site. She saw him interred. She was the first at the grave on Sunday morning. And Jesus honored Mary's tenacious love. On Friday, Mary's world collapsed. All that was left to give purpose to her life was to grieve his memory. But when she went to the grave on Sunday morning, bringing more perfume, she found that someone had opened the grave and taken his body. Had the owner of the grave changed his mind and ordered the body removed? Had the authorities decided after all that Jesus couldn't be buried in a proper cemetery? Nearly hysterical, she ran back to Jerusalem and told the rest of the disciples. Peter and John raced off toward the tomb, and she followed them back to the tomb. Eventually, they left and raced back to safety in the upper room. Not Mary. She lingered. She would never leave him. And you know the story. She's weeping tears again, like the day at Simon's feast. Tears falling uncontrollably so she could hardly see, lingering near his grave, nearly incoherent with grief. And almost immediately she stumbled blindly into a man who asked sympathetically, "Why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" And taking him to be the gardener, she mumbles, "Excuse me, sir, do you know where they have taken him? If you have taken him out of here, can't you tell me where you put him? I'll take care of him." She stares, unseeing, at the ground, waiting. The entire population of heaven is waiting for his answer. Angels are waiting to take Jesus back to heaven to greet the Father. The agony of the weekend is over. The suspense of the past 33 years is over, and Jesus has won. Hundreds of thousands of angels line the corridors to accompany Jesus back to the throne of heaven. The Father himself stands with eager expectancy to receive his Son. But the King of the universe waited. The angels waited. The universe waited for the Son of God to greet Mary. And then she hears his voice, that voice. The voice that had reached her innermost being before. The supposed gardener finally spoke, Mary. His voice penetrates her grief-induced mental haze. Teacher, Rabbi. She throws herself at his feet and grips him, crying, You're alive. Don't hold me, Mary, Jesus said quietly. I have not yet gone to greet my Father. But Mary, I need you to do something for me. Go tell my brothers, Peter and John and the others, those chicken-hearted disciples, that I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary, go now. He commissioned Mary to be the first preacher ever of the gospel of a risen Savior. Jesus put his hand on her head, gently pulled his feet from her grasp, and was gone. Again, she had reason to live. She had a job to do. And because he lived, courage to do it.